You seen this game recently? Yes, the existence of Girls Frontline 2 implies the existence of Girls Frontline 1. But what you may not know is the absolute shit show of a game this was behind the scenes before release. And I don't just mean the broken game. I'm talking betrayals and a 1-year fight between the devs and the publisher, to the point where we literally had info hidden behind locked doors like a spy movie. Shouting matches and police were literally called. And this so-called cockroach of gacha games somehow still lives. Today I present the story behind Girls Frontline 1. Girls Frontline was primarily born from two men, Yu Zhong and Yao Ming. For simplicity, I'm just gonna call them Zhong and Ming. At the time, they were both students, and Ming had a vision to create games. Therefore, he created a forum for fan game developers in 2008, and Zhong happened to be one of the chatters. The two got along very well as they shared the same ideals, and eventually, the two collaborated on a fan-made magazine called Chinese Fan Games Magazine. It didn't sell much, but it established a strong relationship between the two. Fast forward a few years, Ming opened his own studio with a friend in 2011, and in 2012, Zhong approached him with an idea, a story-driven game called Codename Bakery Girl. Zhong could draw and design the game, but he lacked a programmer, which Ming's studio had. Ming agreed to the idea, and the two once again collaborated and created Bakery Girl. As you can see, despite the name, it's actually based in a sci-fi military setting. Over its development, the two became very close. They literally started living together on the same bunk bed. The game released and they sold some copies at some doujin conventions, but over the years, Ming realized a problem. There are no agencies outside that distribute games made by people with ideals about games, like for indie games. So why don't I do it? Why don't I become a game publisher? I can fill that role for people. Ming informed Zhong and they agreed that for the next game, Zhong would develop the game while Ming would handle the publishing. They signed a 50-50 revenue contract, meaning they each get half for the sales of the game. The two trusted each other so much that Ming recalled not even getting a lawyer when signing the contract. Zhong's studio would be called Sunborn, and Ming's publishing company would be called Wave Game. At this time, Ming actually also founded YoStar, which you may know for publishing these games, but we won't get into that, that's a different story. And so started development for the game Girls Frontline. Girls Frontline was a mobile strategy RPG, and Zhong cites Command and Conquer, Red Alert, and Kantai Collection as an inspiration for military waifu designs such as these. They also made microtransactions limited to costumes rather than strong items and characters, as they deliberately wanted to avoid pay to win, and didn't want players to feel pressured into spending. Also, they wanted a game far bigger in scale than Bakery Girl, and picked this military niche because there just weren't that many back then. Development started in early 2015 by Sunborn and its small team. It was publicly announced in June and aimed to release by October. But little did they know, disaster was about to come. The first beta was in August, and the team expected about maybe 1,000 to 2,000 people, and instead 6,000 people showed up. It was no AAA game, but it had its charm and did well within its niche. Both investors and fans were quite happy with its performance too. The second beta test in October would not go so well. There were huge upgrades to the game's UI and core gameplay, and in preparation for the first beta's large demand, they prepared 6,000 beta codes. But they were naive. As the test started, 3,000 to 4,000 players tried to log in simultaneously, and the sudden load caused the game's servers to crash. Why? Well, these guys only had doujin game experience, aka offline games. The team had little experience with online server architecture, and had not optimized the game for high concurrency. As in, they didn't even know what back-end development was. And in the end, the lead programmer's girlfriend had to solve the problem. Damn, he has a girlfriend. With servers going back up in 8 hours. This confused fans, but they still enjoyed it. The military waifu niche has loyal fans. Trust me, I have friends that are way too into it. And then the third beta somehow went even worse. The third beta was a little different in nature. It was a sort of final beta test, where players were able to spend actual money in the in-game shop, and this data would transfer to their account when the full game released. Unfortunately, within 2 hours, the servers crashed once again. And this time, things would not proceed as smoothly. Both Sunborn and Wave Game, in a panic, hired a bunch of consultants and technicians to find the problem problem, which ensued chaos because all these consultants and technicians, like 7 or 8 at a time, together, would start arguing with each other over the real cause of the problem. It's literal comedy! In the end, the problem was speculated to be a very unoptimized database, leading to database congestions when there are too many requests. This conflict took 9 whole days to solve. Yes, the beta test servers were down for 9 whole days. What's worse is their Weibo, or the Chinese equivalent of Twitter, simply crashed and they couldn't give angry and confused players any updates until 1.5 days later. Amazingly, the beta participants spent around 2 million renminbi during those test days, so it didn't do bad monetarily, but perhaps because this raised the stakes, arguing and endless conflict ensued. Essentially, Sunborn and Wave Game started blaming each other for all the beta test problems. Wave Game said that Sunborn doesn't solve any back-end problem themselves and throws everything to us, giving us only a few hours to fix everything with no time to test. We have to read their code and solve their mess. Sunborn, on the other hand, blamed Wave Game for not collecting any data on the third beta test. They said that Wave Game did not collect any player data or operational activity data at all and provided no market plan whatsoever. What was the point of the beta if they weren't gonna use its data to improve the game? Both sides also accused each other of being understaffed. Chinese working culture. Both sides also said they've tried their best to communicate, and in general, both sides just blamed each other for a lot of stuff. What's worse is, staff of both companies seemed very distressed when interviewed. Oh yeah, speaking of interview, this entire drama was full on public display. Like, you know those kind of YouTuber dramas where like they respond to each other, they're fighting and people are taking sides? Yeah, it's the same here. Fans were literally picking sides to support, speculating on the story, finding evidence to boost one side's argument, and so on. This was also because Zhong and Ming were young people who frequently use social media, meaning they knew how to get an audience on their side and frequently criticize each other online. It was literally just drama alert, except for 1 fucking year. It was a fucking mess. Thank God Keemstar doesn't know Chinese! What was once an unbreakable friendship had now devolved into endless drama. Ironically, the third beta test showed that the game most certainly had an audience and potential, attracting more investors, and this would lead to the next big incident. At this point, Sunborn had kinda given up on Wave Game. They wanted a more reliable publishing partner and started seeking one. This is where a company called Windplay Network came into play. They were interested in Girls Frontline, and in early March 2016, Windplay representatives actually came to the shared office space between Sunborn and Wave Game, which enraged Wave Game as it felt like a betrayal. Zhong, however, argued he did this to keep everything transparent. On the other side, Ming was pissed off because he said that the conditions that Windplay Network gave were way harsher than the ones he gave, but then somehow Zhong is siding with this other guy rather than him, his friend. But on the flip side, also in March, Zhong found that Wave Game had authorized another company, Kulai Games, to distribute the Android version of Girls Frontline without Sunborn's involvement. This enraged Sunborn. Ming claims that there were talks, but he didn't sign the contract in the end, so legally it hadn't been executed. But it was too late. Both parties had already tried to replace each other, and there was no saving this business relationship. So the day after, the two tried negotiating a termination of contract. You know, the one that they signed without any lawyers? It only escalates more from here. After discussion, they did somehow come up with a draft of the termination agreement, and both of them signed it. But then, the document mysteriously disappeared the next day. Apparently, Ming took it, like physically just stole it before it could be executed to protect his own interests because he claims Zhong made insane demands. This disappearance made Sunborn extremely paranoid, and they suspected that Wave Game had powerful backers, especially because Ming was quite a powerful guy. Like, he was already the CEO of Yostar at the time. Sunborn feared that the code and assets of Girls Frontline might be taken. I mean, it was their game. Because of this, they quite literally fled the office. this. As in, they stopped going to work and locked the joint office door so WaveGame couldn't get in, like get the computers. On the same day of this incident, WaveGame employees showed up at the office only to find it locked. It was supposed to be an electronic lock, but the door was even locked physically, leading WaveGame staff to think it was a theft. This office was technically shared property, so WaveGame staff found a locksmith to unlock the door. But when Sunborn employees went back to have a look at the office, they found the door lock pried open with WaveGame staff inside. This led to a direct confrontation between the two sides and heated arguments ensued, to the point where police was called to stop it. At this point, I think it's clear that there was no salvaging the two sides' relationship. But at the same time, they both realized that Girls Frontline wouldn't be able to go anywhere until they resolve this partnership. Like, the game's already been delayed at that point. Throughout April, they held multiple meetings, even with investors and mediators. Ming and Jung even verbally reaffirmed their partnership in almost ceremonial fashion, saying how they will absolutely work together in an oath. But this never got turned into a contract and fell apart. The two sides simply didn't trust each other. Literally every meeting was just full of lawyers and voice recorders to collect evidence. Finally, in May, they came to an agreement. Kind of. WaveGame had enough and just begrudgingly exited the project. However, they held assets like user info and purchase records from the third beta and refused to give them without compensation. Ming claiming that they didn't care about making a profit, but at least wanted to recoup WaveGame's costs, about 6 million renminbi. Sunborn, on the other hand, voided their previous talks and deals with Windplay for legal reasons, like, you know, when negotiating with WaveGame and stuff, and went with another publishing company, Digital Sky. However, they refused to pay the compensation WaveGame wanted. Instead, they found a very complicated workaround for when the game released. Players from the beta would be able to manually verify their final account status using payment receipts, and Sunborn would manually compensate any missing purchased items or currency when the game launched. Manually! One by one! Holy, biggest haters of the generation! But if they didn't want to pay WaveGame, this was possibly the only way to ensure beta players didn't lose their purchases. This made WaveGame super mad. For over a year after launch, the website domain, girlsfrontline.com, which was controlled by WaveGame, displayed an open letter airing WaveGame's side of the story, effectively a public protest against Sunborn's actions, while the actual game operated on a different domain. But despite all the hate, all the drama, that was it. The game somehow miraculously managed to release in China on May 20th, 2016. Before I move on, I do want to say that to not make this video like 45 minutes long, I just went over all the major conflicts and events, skimming some details. There's this interview with both Jung and Ming, so there's a really detailed account of I did this because this, or I suspected this, or you changed because of this, and a lot of complicated mind game blaming and holy copium stuff. It's a mess. There was also a whole ordeal about Jung wanting more money from Ming to make the game, but Ming turned it into a loan, and then they went back and forth, and the amount kept changing. And yeah, just know I went over all the important and major conflicts on this timeline. I'll leave the interview in the description if you're interested, although it's in Chinese. I hope Google Translate is enough. The initial launch of the game was a great success. By September, they had already hit over 1 million registered player accounts, which was incredible for a niche strategy game. People loved the non-pay-to-win aspect of the gacha, as only skins were gacha. Over time, I keep hearing about how amazing the story is, especially the fact that it actually has a proper ending to the story, which is rare in gacha games. Oh, also, there weren't any more large-scale server crashes like the beta, I assume thanks to Digital Sky. Keep in mind, the game wasn't viral. It was no Genshin or Star Rail. In fact, it wasn't even top 10 in China's iOS store. But considering the small team that developed this game, it was a financial success. So much so that they were able to make a full remake of Bakery Girl, including everything they originally wanted back then, but couldn't, to fulfill their creative vision. As Girls Frontline released in regions across the world, it did pretty good. Modestly in Western countries, and really good in Japan and Korea. Particularly Korea. They were super into it. Like, it had its own beta and everything, and the Korean servers literally reached 1 million players viewers in a few weeks. That's faster than China! It hit #1 on Google Play's top grossing in Korea at one point, and was consistently among the top games in the first months of release, which wasn't seen in any other country. Even in Japan, it didn't break top 10. Although that might be because the Japan launch was severely delayed. The game was supposed to launch in 2016, but you know, yeah. It took until 2018 August to release, through Sunborn making its own subsidiary, Sunborn Japan, to publish the game. The series grew. We even got a spin-off like Nero Cloud, an anime adaptation, and even the sequel now, Girls Frontline 2. It had the reputation of being the cockroach of gacha games cause it wasn't profiting as much as the big hitters, but it just never ended service, probably because of how much Jung loved his military girls and story. Unfortunately, there was also one more pretty big issue in 2024 regarding license. Essentially, Sunborn's cooperation agreement with Digital Sky would end on December 31st, 2024. So without the proper license, the Chinese servers would have to stop service on that day, over 8 years after release. Sunborn did emphasize they wanted to bring the game back in another form that kept players' progress. While the mobile version is still down, they did successfully relaunch the game on Steam in China, letting players go back to their old progress. Oh, and this was only a China thing. Every other region was not affected. It never went down. The story of Girls Frontline development is genuinely batshit insane. This was literally YouTuber beef aired live, except it was two goddamn companies fighting, each with their own faction with everything seen by fans online. What the hell is this? It is very sad to see a friendship as close as Jung and Ming's break down like this, but I'm not sure I can really say one betrayed the other. It's just business, right? Moral of the story? Don't do business with your friends if you still want them to be your friends. Special thanks to Vicente Pagani and all my other patrons and members for supporting the channel.